What's up, everybody? It's your boy Drew with High Fight IQ, and you are now watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with my boys Todd Adkins and Miguel Iterate. Miguel has been the matchmaker for over 200 shows worldwide and has worked with Hook and Shoot, Euphoria, Bodog, and ADCC. Make sure you subscribe to the Todd Atkins Show on YouTube. You can also find Miguel on his YouTube channel at MMA Collector 74. Don't forget to subscribe to High Fight IQ on all social media platforms, the House Call Sports on YouTube, the Fight Pit on YouTube. Now let's talk some fights, baby. Let's go.
All right, this is Todd Atkins, and I'm back with Miguel Iterate, and today we're going to discuss something that may be controversial, or maybe some people don't agree with, but things that I've been thinking about and Miguel's been thinking about, and that is, this fear show, but also could this be Dana White's final show with the UFC? And some of the things that he has said about the show itself being something he can't top, but also about Power Slap is going to be bigger than the UFC. This is something that we want to get into and kind of figure out, what's the purpose of this? Why is he saying these things? So, Miguel, I kind of want to let you start off there.
We talked a lot about Conor recently, and Dana and Conor, and Joe Rogan. Right there, you're talking about the three richest guys from the sport of MMA. And, of them all, Dana is probably the hardest working guy, the most driven, kind of unstoppable force, and a guy that doesn't seem to really want to take advice well, or, likes to do his own thing, likes to be blusterful about it. And how can you argue with him? So here you're in a situation where he's been on an amazingly successful run for the last 20 years. And he's talking about, the Sphere show and how it's going to be hard for him to top that, and how he may not be able to top it with within the current context of it, being in this company, the UFC and stuff like that. We've also kind of speculated about, what'll happen if Dana moves on with the company. Does Hunter Campbell take over? Does it become more corporate? Dana's at times doesn't look like he wants to leave, but at times he has looked a little aloof and a little bored. He's continuing to talk about Power Slap like it's going to be like a major entity. Like I said, if you're on a run like he's been on, why wouldn't you think that everything that you touch is going to be gold like that? But again, Power Slap is now, here's the other part of it is it's been around now under Dana's watch for a couple of years. It's not like, 3 months ago it just popped up. It's been there and I don't know what's brewing there, or if he thinks, but I'm not seeing a TV show yet. I'm not seeing, the guys from Russia that they were promising to bring in, and et cetera, et cetera. I hear a lot of talking where he doesn't admit that, it may not be the most monetizable thing. But Dana never admits his failures, So could we be seeing the first step of him actually maybe leaving the UFC? And I'm not saying to go do Power Slap, but the association with the Saudi Arabia and Riyadh season and this type of stuff on this big UFC show that's coming up is notable. And that country has a huge amount of budget dedicated to impacting the sports. Many different sports, car racing, tennis, golf, boxing, have all felt the impact of going to get Saudi money. Tyson Fury and Ngannou was over there because they paid the most. And they've got the money to pay. The budget is there, and there's a publicity aspect to it where You know, a lot of people go over there, see the fights, see a spectacular show, have fun. They're well treated. Um, for lack of a better word, I'm sure, you know, more people get mugged in Las Vegas than in Riyadh. You can say that with pretty good certainty, especially, tourists that came to Vegas and maybe got ripped off some way, shape, or form. But in Riyadh, I don't know that that's the case where it's like, yeah, I got mugged in an alley. Safe places. And that's part of the publicity that they want going out. People having a good experience on a mass level over there, and it begins to change the country. Because 20, 30 years ago, the House of Al Saud was a kind of closed country, basically. People couldn't go over there to do this sort of stuff.
Right.
When the Ngannou Tyson Fury fight was there, we've mentioned this on a couple of podcasts. Bob Arum, a Jewish lawyer, was front and center at the press conferences in Saudi Arabia. That would have been unheard of 30 years ago. So they are trying to affect change at the highest level for their country and for the image of their country. And I was thinking to myself that if they wanted to really come in and do some type of impact on boxing or MMA and boxing, or make a bigger company than the UFC, they have the money to do it. And wouldn't it be interesting if Dana White stepped aside from the UFC to go head a new company with some big time foreign money, where he's going to have just a lot. He would be back in a place where he's unfettered, because now you kind of get the feeling that with the UFC, maybe a little jaded, maybe the corporate aspect of it is something that he's not as happy with all the time and stuff. It doesn't float his boat anymore, really. It's like his interest in power. So maybe, and with a company like that that's going to bring him in as a chairman, and he could shove Power Slap down our throat along with everything else. And he would be completely in charge again. Whereas, now I think he does have to deal with boardroom meetings that he didn't have to deal with the Fertitas.
And they're working with him on this Power Slap, apparently.
Like I
Which
said,
is interesting.
Yeah, like again, to me, Power Slap is not a sport; it's a non-entity. And for him to make statements like it's going to be bigger than the UFC and stuff like that, so let's talk about this, okay? The UFC has headlined Madison Square Garden. We'll leave it at that because obviously the big arenas in Vegas, what they're doing here, they've gone to big arenas all over the world. You're going to tell me that 18,000 people are going to pay upwards of $100, $200 a ticket, $500 for ringside seats for Power Slap? Yeah, that's not happening. So he can say it's bigger, or it's going to be bigger than the UFC, and he may actually have some type of plan to put it in people's face. With a bigger company like that, with involvement from outside the world. At the end of the day, the Saudis have the interest of promoting their country. They don't. So as long as they're doing activity at the highest level, they might leave him in charge and just let him run wild with Power Slap for a little while. And that could be what's happening here, is that Dana maybe, we've talked about maybe he was ready to move on from the UFC. And I've always said, anybody who listens to our podcast, I've always said that I think he's a lifer like a Bob Arum type, where he's going to be 70, 80 years old, still doing matchmaking and fighting with the UFC. But like he's been in public at times, like not, like literally not giving a shit anymore at times. It doesn't float his boat the way it used to before. And so how do you get charged up again? Maybe he's getting ready to move on to something bigger that we're not seeing yet. Some type of conglomerate of MMA, where Dana's face on MMA, obviously. He's like, yeah, we got to do power slap too, and so the Saudis are like, oh, sure, we'll do power slap, and then maybe boxing combined. Dana's always flirted with boxing. Even going back to the ridiculous, publicity stunt when him and Tito Ortiz were going to have a boxing match, and Dana wanted to convince us he's a boxer. But Dana's always, I believe Dana made a big money offer at some point to get Anthony Joshua over to the flag, but the structure of boxing makes it difficult for him to actually matchmake and things like that. Guess what?
And to monopolize, that's the more important thing.
Right.
Yeah,
but in Saudi
that's
Arabia,
why they didn't cross over initially, is because they couldn't monopolize it in the same way they've done UFC.
So if a company were to be founded in Saudi Arabia, all bets are off. You don't even need the Muhammad Ali Act. Who's going to enforce the Muhammad Ali Act over there?
Right. Same with Power Slap. John Fitch was telling me, the other night when I was on his live feed, that they would rather have something that can't be regulated than continue on with the UFC, which will eventually get more regulation than it already has. Maybe it'll take 5 years, maybe it'll take 10 years, but it's coming, because the thing that they did was they passed it off as a sport, and a sport has to be regulated. Power Slap's not a sport.
Right. And over there, as long as he's got, because of the way the structure of authority is in that country, as long as he's already got the people in charge on his side, then he'll have carte blanche to do what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting speculation, and I guess we could still watch it on TV. I guess they could still monetize it in the States in some way, shape, or form. He might experience some pressure. Somebody saying, well, you're going to do unregulated stuff. You're not going to follow the Muhammad Ali Act and do boxing, but we won't show it on TV. But, with the other platforms and things like that are out there, television and pay-per-view, since the days of Floyd Mayweather, there's been speculation that the pay-per-view model is going to have to go away at some point. It's not really the best model for this type of thing anymore. You saw inklings of it with DAZN and things like that. Whereas, like, I think DAZN came in and threw like a $300 million contract at Canelo, but they very much seem to have run into the same thing that Dana did with his offer on Anthony Joshua. It's like, okay, but what do you do for an encore? How do you follow it up? How do you actually sustain the sport going forward?
Yep.
And but having a powerful streaming platform, and don't sleep on their involvement with the WWE, even though apparently the companies are on their way to breaking up or have broken up a little bit and stuff like that. But the WWE has a very strong platform with the WWE universe and people watching streaming products and things like that. The technology is there. The ability to do it is there. The WWE has shown it better than any of the other companies. And it may be a big move to something like that coordinated, where they come out with, there's always been speculation from, forget what the original ones were called, but like there were guys that, I think there was a Canadian company that said, we're going to be a fight channel and, we're going to show 24 hours of fights and things like that. And there have been a couple of entities like that have flirted with the idea. So the idea is out there. But to actually make it happen, you see the first inkling of how that could happen when you get a power player like Dana, combined with the deepest pockets in the sporting world right now.
Yeah, and the other thing I think, at least from my mind, is they made this Fight Inc. show, which was on Roku channel. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but I did watch it. And, Hunter Campbell was very visible in it. And I don't think they just do that stuff by mistake. I think there is a purpose in that. by making him more visible on this documentary series that they did for Roku. I don't think they just said, "Hey, let's have Hunter Campbell in here more."
Yeah, yeah, we've speculated. Hunter appears to be a few years younger than Dana. If Dana does move on, maybe Dana's behind the scenes let them know, look, I may go off and, I'm getting an offer from Saudi Arabia to go head something bigger than you guys. So I may take that. So he leaves the company behind to Hunter Campbell. Hunter, like we've talked about, also is a lawyer. With the new structures of the companies, they're slanting more towards that corporate type of presentation and things. And Dana's not. Dana's a roll your sleeves up, guy that likes to do things his own way without dealing with lawyers. So it may be the first portent of change, which would be Dana stepping down to go head maybe something bigger, and the UFC moving on. And they'll probably experience some inkling of it getting a little smaller too. And that's one thing that they haven't really had to deal with in their existence, except for, back in the Bob Meyerowitz days. But the UFC hasn't actually gone through the cycle of for example, Major League Baseball, in our lifetimes at some point, actually, people younger than us, a lot younger than us, may not even know or be aware of it. But in Major League Baseball, they actually had the players go on strike, and the owners hired lesser baseball players to man the teams. And all of a sudden, the Yankees were still out there with people that are not world famous. Certainly, their revenue went down. There was ups and downs there. Their revenue may not have recovered for a year or two after that, or even more. The UFC hasn't really had that, peak and edge fall off at any point, not noticeably, not in a way that where it's like, the last 3 years haven't been as good. But that time may be coming, especially with Dana gone off to do something else, and maybe competing in some way, shape, or form with them.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in charge of Endeavor and I hear that Dana White's saying Power Slap is going to be bigger than the UFC, I would be like, "What is this? You're the promoter of the UFC. We have you in this position. Why are you saying this nonsense? It doesn't help our product for you to be saying that."
Yeah,
granted, no one believes you, but still.
We've speculated about this, and that is that, Dana and the Fertittas had a very kind of special relationship. You hear about it when, Dana and the Fertittas announced I think at the UFC Japan that they were going to buy the event in one of the early 19, I think UFC with Meyerowitz did 3 or 4 shows in Japan. And I think at the last one, they went along with the guys and the fighters and stuff. At that point, Dana, I think, was Tito's manager as well, and this type of thing. And they told the fighters that they were going to buy it. Then they go $40 million into the hole and somehow claw their way out of it. It was all, Dana's tireless effort. You can disagree with the way he maybe did some things and things like that, but you can't argue with success to a certain level, right?
And the Fertittas' willingness to throw money away.
Yeah, the Fertittas also had a passion that they believed in, and now it's going to be left to corporate guys that didn't, I don't know, but I what's the guy's name? Ari Emanuel?
Yeah.
I would almost be certain that Ari Emanuel has never had a gi on.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't say that for the Fertittas. You can't say that for some of those guys. They rolled around. They had a different kind of passion. And so, yeah, I think Dana has been protected by the corporate nature of the new company, in that when they bought from the Fertittas, Dana's contract was reworked and he came to them with certain limitations. It's like, well, if you're going to be able to fire me, why would I even come over? So you can't fire me for X amount of time, or I have to be left in charge of everything that's fight related and this, that, and the other stuff. And there's been some back and forth and things like that, but we've always speculated it can't 100% be happy with Dana all the time. And Dana, as you and I have pointed out, there are times where that I don't give a shit attitude, where he's not in perfect agreement. And with the Fertitas, what you pointed out is very, very interesting. When would he ever have crapped on his product under the Fertitas? When would he ever be exploring something like a power slap as a competition or anything like that? He was 100% dedicated to this and to making this move forward, and he doesn't seem to be that way anymore.
Nope.
How does that make Ari Emanuel feel, and the people in Endeavor feel? Like they got a guy who's now 80% or 75% into it, and not the 100% driven guy that was there before. Yeah, maybe they think they could do a better job. Maybe they think he's a thorn in their side at times. Maybe they'd be glad to see him leave. Maybe they don't want him to leave. But increasingly, the signs are now with this Riyadh show that they've announced. Dana's also come out and said that he doesn't know how he's going to top this one under Ari Emanuel and with the power of the UFC structure. What could you do there? However, if you were now in charge of another company and doing shows maybe in the Middle East or in Saudi Arabia, in that funky line of a city that they're building or something like that, who knows what type of buzz and topping of what he's done in the MMA game could come if he was involved in some type of combination of MMA, boxing, power slap. You might be able to throw bare knuckle in there. That would be something that if he were given the freedom that he experienced in the early days, that might float his boat, because right now he's at times his reaction to not having some of those freedoms is, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, if you can get it all over into the Middle East, where you can control it all, you have MMA, power slap, bare knuckle, you have all these things, and you control it all. I don't know if he'd want to make an MMA competitor to the UFC if the UFC remained corporate. Who knows? Maybe he would. But
that's an uphill battle, because at the end of the day, you would have to have the same. And here's what the Saudi experience gives you, right? If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not an expert on golf, it's not my thing. I never played golf, don't like it. But they took the PGA Tour and said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you've got contracts with your guys, and all the best golfers golf there, and they make big money in the States and stuff. But we're going to throw a lot more money at them here in Saudi Arabia, and we'll see how many of them walk away and tell you to go scratch with your contracts. What are you going to do? Sue me in Saudi Arabia, the PGA Tour? Come try your hand and see how the judges here will decide for your case. So what if he goes to John Jones and says, John, I'm going to do you and Ngannou in Saudi Arabia. This is the amount of money you guys are going to get. And if the UFC tries to stop you, tell them to go scratch. If the PFL tries to stop Ngannou, tell them to go scratch. It's just speculation on fight matchmaking. But they would have to aggressively go after fighters to break their contract. But the PGA Tour experienced this. Many, I don't know if most, but many of the top golfers in the world said, yeah, we're going to leave the PGA Tour and go golf in Saudi Arabia because the money's better. So, yeah, he could effectively mess up the UFC by having fighters break their contracts. And it's been done in golf by some of the powers that are moving over there. Which is very interesting speculation.
Yeah, it is. That is, kind of like the Craig Jones Abu Dhabi thing. A lot of the stars in the Abu Dhabi tournament have already signed with Craig Jones, even though they didn't really have exclusive contracts with ADCC. But because he's going to pay. Hopefully, he pays. But on its face, there he's going to pay a lot better, and pretty much everybody except for Gordon Ryan has bounced over there already.
Yep. And if there's anything you can say about Dana is that he wouldn't back down from something like that. If he could throw tireless energy at it and come out on top, he'll take that fight. He always has. He's not a guy who's going to be shy and be like, oh man, I'm tired, or it's going to be too much effort or anything like that. I think that you can look at him to embrace a bigger challenge that he no longer has by having to go to boardroom meetings with guys that, weren't on that airplane with Tito Ortiz and the Fertitas and the fighters going to Japan when they announced that they were getting in on the game.
Yeah. It's incredible, some of this whole topic, not just Dana, but the Riyadh season, and how they're getting into different, not just the UFC, but PFL also. I think they're doing some sponsorship of Riyadh season presents whatever.
Yeah.
So they're becoming a real player in everything, boxing,
look,
MMA.
they've got the funds dedicated to sport that were not there before, So the Fertitas were rich. The corporate Endeavor company is richer. Who's richer than them? The Saudis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very, very interesting speculation there that, we've seen some writing on the wall. Some questions have come up about Dana's dedication. I always said that I feel Dana, is going out doing this stuff, but maybe he does have a switch or something in mind of a return to him being the absolute power, the absolute dictator, which at this point he's not.
Yeah, he could leave the UFC for Riyadh season. He could be the head of,
and the UFC could have a contract
Riyadh season.
And the UFC could have a contract that prevents him from competing against them. And if he does it in Saudi Arabia, there's absolutely nothing they can do about it.
That's right.
So
this
is going to be a very interesting thing to watch. It's going to be interesting to watch how the show's, the build up to the show, the amount of energy that Dana puts into it. But another interesting thing to watch will be, what is Riyadh season? Is it a logo and a nice presentation there, or will there actually be the presence of some of their executives and some of the people in charge of the money that become involved with appearing with Dana? So, is Dana going to make appearances now with other groups and other companies that are not the Endeavor Group anymore? Is he heading in a different direction? It'll be very interesting to see what kind of presence they have. Because so far, obviously, they like to throw their names around, and everybody, from Tyson Fury to everybody, when they do the big events, thank the Sheik and thank, but those are minimal presences. Will there be signs of a greater involvement coming from Riyadh than just to do, show to show? Are they going to be dedicated? They say, look, we got a 5-year plan under Dana, and all of a sudden, boom, Riyadh season in September in Vegas, and then we're right back in October, November, December, and we've got shows in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, in places where we can't be stopped, we can't be controlled.
Yeah, it's interesting. UFC embrace regulation, now they want to run away from it,
Yeah.
Because of the antitrust stuff and whatnot.
Yeah, they embrace, they never embraced regulation. What they embraced was money. And,
right.
And what they knew they had to do is they knew they had to get the commissions and things to take the edge off the sport, because there was a lot of damage done in the early days with the blood sport attacks with John McCain's attacks, with even stupid things like I remember promoter Jamie Levine doing a show in Evansville, Indiana. And on the radio, he was saying that, that he's taking all the fighters to it's not a morgue, but like to basically to pick out their caskets. That's what he promoted on TV. So there was enough damage done with that the way to eliminate that and get people on your side is to have the commissions. Now in every state, the commissions operate, and it's much more accepted. So they needed the commissions for the acceptance and to make the money and to break in big. They actually never really would have liked, if they could have operated without them, they would have. But the commissions in America have played their role, and I think that you could see that, Dana's kind of tired of that, and that may be time for their role to sunset, or for they can keep doing what they're doing in the States, but the home to the biggest fighting in the world may no longer be in the United States.
Yeah, I can't see how. The one thing I would say is I can't see how he'd be able to go over there and Endeavor not want a piece of that action.
This goes back to look. I bet my life that there is a contract between Dana and Endeavor that the Fertittas were involved in and said you can't buy the company unless Dana keeps all the power. And that makes Dana operate very much the way Dana operates. And if he doesn't like, that scene in Star Wars where the walls start moving in and they're trying to block the walls from closing in. Yeah, when you get into a corporate atmosphere surrounded by lawyers and things, it can be tiring. And we know that if Dana's famous for one thing, it's nobody knows what the fuck you're talking about except him. Some lawyer for the WWE said something kind of silly, and Dana had no bones about destroying him. Now, he made, he called him an idiot. He said what he said was wrong. Every, WWE fans going to be a UFC fan. But with the people under Endeavor, he's never called Ari Emanuel an idiot, right? Not in public.
Right.
You think he wants to every once in a while? You never know. But yeah, I think that feeling of I'm tired of the corporate bullshit could very well be what we're seeing, in Dana, is that he's tired of the corporate bullshit and the lawyers and the things like that, and he would love to go and operate in a different atmosphere.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. Yeah, as always, Miguel, appreciate your insight and your contributions to these episodes and these topics. And again, maybe tell people about the MMA Collector and what you have going on there.
Well, while I'm sitting here typing and setting up our next interview, so I'm going to be doing an interview with a fighter on Wednesday that will debut later on in the week. You can check that out. It'll be a long-form interview similar to the one that myself and Todd recently did with Ronald Machine Gun Jun. That Machine Gun Jun interview was one of the most fun interviews I think I've ever done. That had to do with obviously your involvement. And I think he was comfortable because you were there. But also what a nice guy, what a legend, and what a great set of information we got out of there. I'd like to continue getting some of the Hawaiian guys through your through your connections and stuff as well. I think that would be great. And I think that they all got great stories to tell. So we'll see. That was good. We also did recently a fight watch party with Aaron Riley, MMA veteran. The types of insights in the previous show, we mentioned that when you have the fighters actually watching their fights, they'll say things and make you recognize just their perspective on things. And it's so different. So, Aaron obviously wound up fighting many times in the UFC afterwards. And he didn't make it to the championship level of the UFC and stuff, but he had a good career. And he had an excellent career with shows when he got started that he was the poster boy of. But he lamented somewhere in there, just the sayings he said, I own a UFC record that I wish I didn't. And that is that he's had his jaw broken twice in the UFC. And that's just the kind of thing that, you wouldn't even think of that. You wouldn't even understand it. But to hear it said, it just gives you a new insight onto what these fighters have put themselves through, entertaining us throughout their whole careers. So we're going to do more of that as well. Maybe we can even have Machine Gun John back to watch a fight together with us, me and you. Pick a good one from his career. There's so many. And just have some fun with him walking down memory lane. I think he appreciated it a lot. So I think there's a lot of potential there for us to keep going with some great stuff.
Yeah. As always, people check out MMA Collector 74. That's the channel we're talking about. Miguel's MMA Museum, MMA Collector kind of podcast. And we highly encourage people to check that out. And as always, we appreciate your support. Subscribe to our channels. And until next time, take care.
Hola, soy Litzy La Bomba Dilene, boxeadora profesional de México, y estás viendo el show de Todd Atkins, en donde verás y escucharás a grandes talentos del boxeo. No te lo puedes perder.